Those that support war, like myself, we do so because we feel the danger of not going to war is significantly greater at this point. I think people don't realize how close Iran is to having a nuclear weapon if they don't already have one.
Hi guys, and welcome to The Conversation, a Crossing Party Lines or CPL podcast. CPL is a non-profit that hosts weekly discussions where people with differing views share and listen to each other to better understand their thoughts about American life. I'm your host, Marcus Johnson, and today we're talking about the war in Iran, necessary response, costly fallout, or something in between. Let's meet today's guest. We welcome Jack to the show, a Gen Xer from New York. Jack, welcome.
Hey, Marcus, glad to be here.
Hey, fella. Thank you so much for your time today. All right, we're going to get to know Jack in about 60 seconds. I've got some rapid fire questions for him. So, Jack, let's do it. What do you do for a living?
I am currently a project manager, have some rentals I take care of. Prior to that, I grew up in New York and worked on Wall Street about 20 years.
Okay.
So I have a lot of accounting, Wall Street knowledge, and I wanted to get away from that. I got tired of it. And I love the real estate component because it's a win-win. You get to help people out. You kind of match the right person with the right property.
Yeah, very nice. Favorite thing to do not called work?
Relax, hiking, be in my backyard, not fixing things, not dealing with problems.
Okay, nice. Do you have a favorite TV show, movie, book, podcast right now?
I do. A podcast. I listen to a lot of YouTube podcasts. CPL might be one of my new favorites. I don't know.
Yes.
This is my first podcast
Good
ever.
answer.
I listen to a ton of podcasts. This is the first one I'm actually ever doing.
Amazing.
So I'm going to be a little bit nervous probably.
That's okay.
But I do like I like reading Foreign Affairs. It's a periodical. I also get it online, a lot of articles.
Okay.
What I love about it is it goes in depth and you understand the genesis of a lot of the issues that we have, a little background. And it's exciting for me to do that because I think I'm a problem solver by nature.
We were talking before the show about a TV show you're watching, or a couple. What are some of your favorites?
Yeah, Traders. And
nice. And you were saying, what's the other one with the suitcase?
$1 million in a suitcase, I think it's called.
Okay.
And it's just a
similar concept.
Yeah, similar concept. Someone's going to come home with $1 million, and this one's actually better. It's on Netflix. It's even It's even better than Traders. If you don't know it, check it out. Very good show. It's a really interesting game of funny challenges and deceit. A lot of deceit.
Sounds stressful. What's one goal you're working towards this year? Final question.
Do more relaxation. Stop thinking about politics so much. I used to avoid politics all the time until 9/11. And then, my understanding was that the U.S. was helping everybody. We're giving food out to everyone. I don't understand why anybody would want to do that to us. So I do a lot of politics. I pay attention to a lot of politics now. I have family in Europe, family in the Middle East, family in Israel. So I care. I care about all sides of what's happening. Mm-hmm. So my goal is to maybe turn politics off a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe get my kid more prepared to be away in college because he has me worried a little bit. He likes to party.
He's going far?
He's staying in state because I have to be able to check on him every once in a while. he is the party animal of the family, and we're all a little bit worried about him.
Okay.
I'm sure he's going to have a blast. He's excited to leave, so I'm sure he'll be fine.
Yeah, amazing. So that's Jack. Jack, thank you so much for being here. Today, we are talking all about, as I said, the war in Iran. So what's going on? The current conflict involving Iran, the US, and Israel began late February 2026 with large-scale US and Israeli airstrikes targeting Iran's military infrastructure and leadership. There's the assassination of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, triggering a rapid escalation. Iran responded with missile and drone attacks on US positions and regional allies, whilst also threatening key oil shipping routes, turning the situation into a broader Middle East crisis. Since then, ongoing strikes, regional proxy involvement, and economic disruption have deepened instability, with neither side achieving a decisive advantage. Diplomacy stalled, and despite heavy damage and casualties, Iran's government remains in control, with Mojtaba Khamenei, the previous leader's son, appointed as the new supreme leader. So, quick summary of what's been going on there the last couple of months. The first question I have for you, Jack, is should the US have taken action against Iran in the first place?
Yeah, that's a deep question, and I'll tell you this: reasonable people can disagree on whether or not we should be going to war and military actions required. Those that support war, like myself, we do so because we feel the danger of not going to war is significantly greater at this point. And when I say significantly greater, I mean it's catastrophically greater. I think people don't realize how close Iran is to having a nuclear weapon if they don't already have one, because it's not just the enrichment material that they need. They also need igniters and some other technology to actually make it explode. And when you do have all of that material, it's only 100 pounds. These big missiles that we see on TV, that's to get the missile like to the other side of the planet. The actual warhead is tiny. It can be delivered by drone. And I don't think people realize the rhetoric that's coming out of Iran and has been coming out of Iran for the last 50 years. And it's not just empty rhetoric. They are doing what they say they always wanted to do. And I think the situation is very dangerous with the weaponry that's now available with the drones as the delivery mechanism and how hard it is to defend against that. We're seeing what's happening, how hard Russia, it can't defend Moscow from Ukraine, as a much smaller country. We had drones flying over Virginia 2 years ago. Those investigations are still ongoing. We haven't quite figured out what that is. There's a huge sense of false security in our aircraft carriers and our fancy planes that they can keep us safe. And I think the world has changed, and some people see it and some do not. And I think that's really where the dichotomy is coming.
Why do you think now is the time, or now was the time to go to war in Iran? Because you're right. They've been concerns about them trying to get hold of a nuclear weapon, and that concerns people because of what they've said about America and how they might use it. But some folks might say, well, hang on a second. America has thousands, Russia has thousands, China has hundreds, North Korea has about 50. So why should we be focusing on Iran, and why now?
That is a fantastic question. And I think the answer to that question is that there are rogue states. Some state, we have nuclear power. We've always had nuclear missiles. We never threatened to use them on people we never threatened global domination. In fact, when we go into war, like we did in Kuwait, we left and we gave the land back. We said, here, live, you guys are in charge, live in freedom and peace. We just want freedom and peace, and we want you guys to control your own destiny. Same thing in Iraq. And North Korea, although they're rogue, they don't have aspirations. I think that, unlike Iran, they don't have aspirations to take over the world, to create their vision by force. My problem, and this is why I love crossing party lines, is that we can't get a full story from the press. If you listen to one side of the news, you hear it's a war of choice. We're worried about gas prices. Cost of living. This is insane. And the other side, we're hearing that we're about to potentially get one of our cities annihilated by a nuclear bomb delivered by drone. We could lose DC. We could lose Virginia. We have unknown drones flying over our airspaces. And we have a country that wants to hurt us, who are dead set against the freedoms and our society as it exists, and sees it as their duty to bring in their version by force, if need be, convert or die, or we kill you. And they actually believe and welcome an Armageddon. They have a religious duty to usher in a nuclear holocaust, because in their view, they feel that this is when their hidden imam, in their religion, will come down, their Messiah, and will establish a global caliphate under Sharia law with Iran as the head. And this is what this is not hidden. This is out there. This is the messages broadcast. And this is why so many protesters and neighbors are deathly afraid of Iran. What exploded on February 28th was not a new conflict. It was the explosion of 50 plus years of grievances, not only in the region, but now you have another layer, the US and China, because sanctions would work against Russia, against Venezuela, if they weren't undermined by China. And you asked this a very important question. Why now? Well, because Iran has technology now that we can't stop. They have, and soon they'll have hypersonic missiles, if they don't already have it, that will take out any of our ships. So gone are the days of feeling that security.
What would you say to folks who say, we're hearing what they're saying, and it does sound concerning. However, that would be like if you were saying something and the authorities thought that you were working on weapons or something that was going to be dangerous and intervened before you'd actually done anything. There might be some people who are like, well, they haven't done it yet. So what gives America the right to assume they're going to and to step in?
I mean, that is a very good question, because there is such a thing as bluster, right? We all say things we don't mean. And war has a lot of risks. We can't predict how things are going to turn out. We always have to weigh the cost of inaction. What will it cost us if they do mean it and do it, versus, let me dismiss it. It's fear mongering. This is not real. They don't really mean to do that. And if you have any doubts about whether they mean what they say, just ask Israel. They have surrounded Israel and poured billions of, even though they have major issues in their own infrastructure. Literally, the capital of Iran has to be abandoned soon because of all these structural and infrastructural problems. They don't have water, that they overdrawn from their wells, creating hollow pockets, and the land is sinking to the point where almost all the structures will soon be uninhabitable. They're literally talking about abandoning their capital city. And in the midst of all this dire situation, domestic, they are pouring most of their funds not into their people who are desperately want to fight back against this regime. And then when they do, we saw what happened. They were mowed down in the streets. The people can't do it on their own, and it's a difficult situation. Iran is putting their money where their mouth is, and they are creating offensive weapons, funding proxies, and denying personal involvement. Though everyone in the world knows, they say it wasn't me. It was Hezbollah. It was Hamas. It was all these other proxies. But we all know who those proxies really get all their financing, funds, and training from. So it's not hidden. It's just a game until the noose is around your neck and it's too late.
It's hard to know where to draw the line, yeah, because if you don't act and something happens, then people will say, well, you should have. If you do act, and then people will say, well, we don't know if they were going to. And so it is an unenviable decision to have to make. In the beginning, you said that you were for this war, right? You didn't say you were for war, all wars. Like some of them, maybe we shouldn't be here, we shouldn't be there. But for this one, you were saying that you supported going in.
Marcus, I'm against all wars. I think
Hmm.
all problems are solvable. Every single problem we have, and we have many as a world, they're
Hmm.
all solvable. We can talk about the pros and cons of capitalism versus, pros and cons of other economic systems, democracy versus non-socialism. There's a lot of problems in each system, but they have solutions. War is, in my opinion, a waste of precious resources diverted away from human needs to creating weapons. Trillions of dollars by all these countries that are now in a race to build more. Then you not only waste your billions or trillions to create this stuff, then you use it and destroy what little infrastructure, including critical desalination plants for their water.
How much should public opinion influence whether the US does get involved in certain conflicts around the world? In your mind? Because I was looking at some research from
Yeah.
Pew Research Center survey from March, and they were saying 6 in 10 Americans disapprove of President Trump's handling of the Iran conflict, with many saying the decision to go to war was wrong. When it's split by party, it was about 30% of Republicans disapproved of his handling of the conflict, 70%
Mm,
approved. Democrats
yeah.
were more 90-10. There was another survey from Pew saying more Americans said the US action against Iran makes the country and the world less safe. How much should that matter?
Oh, that matters, Marcus. That really, really matters. And I would say, if anything hurts me the most, is that narrative right there, and is the fact that the American people are not being given. People are playing politics in the U.S. completely. They're talking about, oh, look what you did to my gas prices. Look what you did here. They're not talking about what we're trying to do and accomplish. They're not talking about the real reason why we are panicked and worried. And I get it. Americans already have problems with anxiety. They don't need to be worried about D.C. and Baltimore, New York City being blown up. But the threats are there. The capability is there, and the military, the people who know how vulnerable we really are and how dangerous this situation is. We're getting misinformation on both sides. From the left, you're hearing, oh, the strait was open, until you took this action.
On the
No,
Strait
it
of
wasn't.
Hormuz?
The Strait of Hormuz, Iran was holding that hostage ransom for 50 years. They've been threatening to close that down on us for 50, which is the reason why we took all these precautions. Saudi Arabia has taken pipeline precautions and shifted the ship stuff. We invested in oil and gas here domestically because we understood. John McCain was famous for warning us about this, and that Iran is growing exponentially dangerous by the day, and there will be a time where it will be too late for us to do something. And we weren't ready for the consequences of the Strait of Hormuz to be closed in 2010 and 2014. So I'll just mention this: the JCPOA, that international agreement that we had with Iran, that Obama did, was our last bit of effort to go and avoid war. It was the right thing to do. Let's try to talk our way out of this. Let's offer some carrots. The problem with JCPOA is that Iran had no intention to abide by it. They were taking the relief from the sanctions and their funds, and they were immediately channeling it into their proxies, into the execution of their battle plan. If you listen to the right, oh, well, we won on day one. Our military is the best. Dude, that's hogwash. Has nothing to do. Your battleships, your fancy planes, and your iron domes are useless against the weaponry that Iran now has.
Hmm.
Not just the rudimentary stuff like drones, but they have these hypersonic missiles that could go like Mach 15, A, and B, they have other ones that can actually maneuver and outwit your defense interceptors. So we don't have technology to intercept these missiles that they now have. And our boats and carriers cannot defend against these hypersonics. I just want to say this because it makes me so passionate. This is why I think we have to go and we have to do it now. We have to, you hear finish the job. You don't hear any of this stuff coming from the right or the left. But the reality is that there are Chinese cargo planes that are landing, and they're on the news, and we don't know what's coming out of those planes. Is it uniters to create an atomic and a nuclear bomb? Is it hypersonic missiles? We don't know.
So America and Iran, they were about 2 months into, I suppose, what was supposed to be a couple of weeks ceasefire. They've since traded strikes, but the accord that was probably planned was going to be extending the ceasefire, outlining a broad set of principles to reopen the strait, to impose limits on Iran's nuclear program again, to grant Iran relief from sanctions, etc. Has the US, in your opinion, achieved what it set out to do?
I would say we actually achieved a lot of goals here. A lot has changed, but again, you don't see it on the news. We learned that under pressure through sanctions, the Iranian regime would not collapse. Under massive protests, we learned that they will not collapse. They will, unlike the Egyptians, the military defended the people, would refuse orders to shoot on their people. In Iran, we learned they are not Egypt. These guys will actually shoot their own. When we say regime change does not mean one man to Ayatollah to his son. We're talking about the people in power who are at the steering wheel. Regime change, to change them, the driver out, and put in somebody more moderate. Most people don't realize that Iran is composed of mostly minorities. 40% of the country is minority. The IRGC is not really a military of Iran. They're just a
So it's the
cartel.
Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps.
They are a militia that defends the leaders who, like a mafia, own half of the Iranian economy. They don't share it with the people. And these guys do not defend the people.
So
They
you're
defend
saying
just the power brokers.
one of the goals you're saying of the US was to put someone else in power who was more moderate? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, to push out the archer. So we have a bunch of arrows coming at us, and at some point you can't intercept all the arrows. You focus on the archer. The archer is the regime. We're never going to win the war of shooting down incoming missiles unless we go after the archer. That's the regime. That's the regime change. We need somebody who's peaceful.
So some of the right, but that might have been one of the goals. But some of the concern is that the regime's grip hasn't eased, and that the hardline kind of revolutionary guards are still in control, and that the domestic opponents, ethnic separatists, urban protesters, are very quiet. And the Economist was saying Iran's stocks of highly enriched uranium remain untouched up until now. There was an interesting quote from Danny Citronowitz, who formerly headed the Iran desk for Israeli military intelligence. He said, quote, "The war changed the regime, and not in a good way. We created a reality that is worse than what Iranians were facing before the war." And there was another quote from Jabbar Rajabi, who served in the Revolutionary Guard. He studied with the current leader, Khomeini's son, who's now in power in a religious seminary in Qom before defecting in 2016, warned Iran's Arab neighbors about him before his elevation, saying, "If anyone asks what is the most dangerous thing that could happen to Iran and the religion, the answer is Mojtaba Khamenei." So there is some concern that actually things got worse, things got more hardline.
Okay, I disagree wholeheartedly with that take. I don't understand any of the logic of that take at all, because we have to be careful to not trust our ears. It's very easy to say anything you want, to propagandize. You have to watch what people do. And what Iran has been doing, and the late Ayatollah, he was a master at pretending to be moderate or less radical. But all he was doing was buying time and deceitfully hiding his intentions to the West, not to his own. He was very open to wiping Israel off the map when he talked death to Israel, death to America is, and death, and to the global world order was not hidden. There is no more
But there's some
radical than that.
concern that that's just got worse, or maybe even not worse, but it's still the same. Like you've swapped out the father for the son, and the son is no better than the father, I think is the concern.
Yes, see, that's exactly the beauty of what I love your question, Marcus. And I think, man, I want to see this on the media. All we did was reveal that we took the mask off. The father was a seasoned diplomat, 50 plus years. He was seasoned at buying time so that they can do what they wanted to do. To their own, there is no change in messaging in the last 50 years to take over the world by force, to create an Armageddon and destroy the world order. That has never been hidden. That is no more radical than that.
So I want to come back to the question. Do you think the US has achieved what it set out to in the first place?
The US has achieved a lot of things. We set out to do one thing, just make sure they don't get nuclear weapons on their drones or backpacks of suicide bombers. That is our biggest fear. And it's a work in progress. We've been trying to prevent this situation for 50 years. The JCPOA was Obama's way of doing it 15 years ago. We were not ready with our own energy independence, with our own pipeline alternatives to deal with something like this. And we still are not fully ready, but we couldn't wait any longer. And I think we learned what's not going to work. And Thomas Edison found 10,000 ways a light bulb was not going to work before he finally found the way it's going to work. And there's a lot of collateral damage. Everyone's going to, a lot of innocent people get hurt and suffer. It should be avoided at all times. We should try the JCPOA. And we did. And we had inside knowledge that it was being gamified, and it was going to fail. But we weren't ready to deal with that, at the consequences. But we luckily, we had enough people who were smart, who did not abandon our own oil and gas. We'd be in shambles. We'd be like Europe right now if we did not have our ability to run our own economy. And I think one of the reasons why we're at record highs is because we are an island in a storm.
Record highs of what?
Record highs in our markets. Our markets are all now hitting records.
The stock markets?
The stock markets, yeah, sorry.
Right.
And I think it's because our economy is the safest. It's not safe, but it's the
you're
safest
saying that's an
in the world.
indicator of prosperity, like things are going well in the country because our stock markets are.
No, I think we all suffer, right? Gas prices in the world affect goods, the cost of goods, and the U.S. consumer pays the price. There's no one who comes out unscathed in war. What I'm saying is that the U.S. is the most insulated, is the most prepared to weather that storm. But that is not ideal, because even if we're okay, it's not okay for everybody else that we care about. The rest of the world is suffering, and people in the Middle East are suffering. It's just
there's the
something we
argument
should
though that
avoid.
folks here are also struggling, right? So like in America, gas prices were hovering around the $2 a gallon mark since September of 2024. They shot up over $3 within a couple of months, and they're now closer to 450 nationally, according to AAA, reaching 4-year highs. And so it's hard for folks, I think, because they may share your concerns about foreign powers overseas and the threat that they may pose to America. But they're also thinking to themselves, what about healthcare prices? What about paying for groceries? What about paying for your university tuition costs? I guess I'll ask you this. Have you been personally affected by the increase in prices?
Yes, I think everyone is affected. And I'm affected, I think, in more ways than one, because I have family in Europe. I have very close friends that are like family in Israel, and they're literally visiting currently, for the summer,
Nice.
for a week or two, and they're telling me stories about going every night, 5 times a night, going to their bomb shelter. Every home has shelters. So war affects me. 9/11 affected me, and and just to see the human suffering on all sides. There's so much collateral damage, and there's so many innocent people on both sides that are being hurt. $5 gas is the least of my worries. When you're talking about the risk of losing the city of Baltimore or a coastal city, New York City, being bombed, and losing an entire city, I find it hard pressed to worry about. I paid $5 gas several times in the past. I can't even, it doesn't even register as a concern.
So if
When
someone
I
said to you, gas prices are going to go up to 10 because we need to be fighting this war in Iran to keep America safe, would you say that's the cost of doing business?
I would say, you know, I would need to see the certainty that we're about to lose a American city or major European cities or even cities in the Middle East, Abu Dhabi, our allies.
Mm.
That, if I see, if we see an atomic, I would pay that. I would pay $10 and $20. I will walk to work. If that will save an entire city somewhere in the world from being bombed by a nuclear bomb and eviscerated. I mean, like that can happen to Abu Dhabi. It can happen to New York. It could be Europe. I don't know,
Yeah.
but I
So
don't want to see that.
So it's hard because one thing that has gone to plan in terms of what the US is trying to achieve was that militarily they've taken out a lot of capabilities. So I was reading a piece in Al Jazeera from Mahanad Saloom. He's an assistant professor of international politics and security at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies and a number of other things that he does. And he said this quote, he said, when you look at what has actually happened to Iran's principal instruments of power, its ballistic missile arsenal, its nuclear infrastructure, its air defenses, its navy, its proxy command architecture, the picture is not one of US failure. It is one of systematic, phased degradation of a threat that previous administrations allowed to grow for 4 decades. And so he's basically saying Iran's ballistic missile launches have fallen by over 90% from February, a couple of weeks after that. He's saying the drone launches have gone from over 800 to 75. 80% of Iran's capacity to strike Israel has been eliminated, according to the Jewish Institute for National Security of America. Its navy isn't doing well, air defenses. So he's basically saying that that is one big thing that America has done, is to degrade Iran's military capabilities. The problem is that they still have the highly enriched uranium. That still remains untouched. And what you said as well, Jack, it's the human cost of this. There was a live casualties tracker for Al Jazeera that was saying that people who have been killed is in the thousands, including civilians. People have been injured in the tens of thousands, and that's across the whole region: Iran, Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, Iraq, Qatar, Jordan, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Bahrain, Kuwait, Syria, US military personnel. So there has been a horrible cost to this. And Mr. Saloom was saying that it's kind of the moral burden of the US and Israel and others who have carried out any attacks is the human cost. I want to touch on what should happen next. So we had a response basically from Iran right now is because their military has been degraded was to close the Strait of Hormuz. That's where about a quarter of the world's seaborne oil trade passes. And it did put pressure on the US and it seems to have kind of brought them to the table, negotiating table. But where do we go from here? There was an Economist article listing President Trump's options, basically saying he can talk, leave, continue, or escalate. Jack, what should happen next in your opinion?
Uh, well, that's I think short term and long term. I think short term, I think we're doing exactly the right thing. I think we need to hold. We shouldn't be bombing things. I mean, Iran is not responding to bombs. So, but the blockade that we have, Iran's economy requires 90% of their stuff is export and imports are 90% of their economy. This blockade, it will bring them to their knees. It doesn't require any bombs dropped anywhere. So this is exactly, we're doing what we should be doing. In the long term, we have to have regime change, which means IRGC, not one man, not the backup, not his son. We're talking about the entire, the man at the helm has to be a peaceful, moderate, a supporter of the world order, where we all work together. And we all have legitimate grievances. No one's perfect. We're all protecting our own industries here and there. But the world order, we had 75 to almost 100 years of peace because we had a world order where we agreed to play by the same rules. And that got us almost a century of peace. And it's time for people to sit together and say, okay, let's do this another way. And anybody who advocates for war, advocates for invading their neighbor countries, or instituting, by force, an ideology, whatever it may be, that is a threat and a cancer to everyone. And I
But,
think,
but isn't there an argument that the US has done that? That they're saying we have an ideology, we want you to think different. Even if the people in Iran want change, people argue that it's for them to decide. It's for them to rise up and institute regime change. We might have an ideology in the US, but what gives us the right to go and enforce that abroad?
well, that's a great question, and I would say you're touching on the whole theory and doctrine of isolationism. Same thing that Eisenhower confronted in World War II. Why do we? It's not our fight. Why are we there? Why are we getting involved in everyone's fight? And just like Eisenhower, he had to prove to America back then that what happens next door sooner or later becomes your problem. When Venezuela collapses or Mexico collapses, it's going to be your problem next. Millions of refugees come across the water, even in little towns like Cuba. We have a little country of Cuba caused major issues. But when Venezuela collapsed, we are not on islands. We are all interconnected. And isolationism does not work. If isolationism isn't going to keep you safe, and we have to get involved, the question is,
How?
how do we do
What
it?
are the ways? Yeah.
And the key is war should be obsolete. It should be extinct because the whole world knows how dangerous this is, that we should all gather together to surround whatever country went rogue, whether it be North Korea, whether it be Iran, whoever's trying to impose by force their vision on others. If there was sanctions unanimously against Russia, there was nobody propping them up. Like there was no China to prop them up. And that's really what people are failing to see as well. What's happening in Ukraine and what's happening with Iran are rogue states that are emboldened by an alliance that is against the world order. That is why we have war and massive waste of resources for weapons because we have an alliance of rogue nations. And if you don't confront it, it gets stronger.
So if the president calls you tomorrow and says, Jack, what should I do? He wants your advice. Do you say talk? Do you say leave? Do you say continue? Or do you say escalate?
I would say give us the nuclear material right away. I think Trump is his policy, his tone and his demeanor is horrendous. I think it's so important that whatever we do in a respectful way. We have to be honorable, be respectful, understand there's general grievances everywhere. No one's a saint here. So we need to be respectful. I think we stay the course with the blockade. Relief will be on the way when you give us the nuclear material. Or give it to a third party that we can trust. Give it to Europe or somebody.
Pakistan wants to be a mediator at this point, I believe.
Okay, I think getting it out of the hands of the RGC should be step one. And as long as you're moving in the right direction, then we're doing the right thing. And I think that's going to be our first focus. Then we have to talk about them destabilizing the entire world because Hezbollah and their proxies are not just in the region. They're not just threatening all the countries in the region. They're literally in Venezuela. Hezbollah is established in Mexico, in Canada, and in Cuba. And we have a problem because China is aligned with them and is using them. And they too are surrounding the United States in the West.
Yeah, it sounds like you're opting for talk, which is what a lot of folks want the two sides to do. Big problems, though, in terms of the demands on both sides. America wants limits on Iran's nuclear program, on its ballistic missiles, to end its support for these proxies, as you mentioned, Arab militias and Hezbollah in Lebanon and other places. Iran wants America to close the bases nearby, operations, control over the strait. So they're really far away from each other in terms of what the demands are. So it is hard to see them getting to some kind of agreement, some kind of understanding. But everyone in the Gulf desperate to reopen and around the world desperate to reopen the strait and end the months of economic crisis. That much is certainly clear. It's so hard to know. As you said, there's a lot of stuff that people don't know. We can read as much as we want. There's a lot of stuff we don't know. I wonder, though, going back to the public opinion thing, like it's hard to know at what point, if at all, the public's opinion should matter. Because I found this, this was from Visual Capitalist. They had this graphic basically looking on US war approval ratings across every war, basically the major wars. And this war has the lowest public approval of any of the wars. This is a bunch of polls, the Gallup, University of Chicago, ABC, LA Times, etc., all collected. But they're basically saying World War II, at the start of World War II, 97% of Americans supported military action. But for this war, the war in Iran is just 41%, which is the lowest. Do you think if that number was 10%, we still should have gone ahead and done what we did?
I say absolutely. And I think this war is the most misunderstood because we're not getting the full picture. People are not understanding what the threat is. And I think Trump is doing a horrendous job, as is Israel, in communicating what the real threat is. And here's the real solution. We have to use a little arm twisting here to get off of the ledge. We don't want a nuclear exchange. We don't know how many hypersonics they have and what's on those hypersonic missiles. They could be nuclear material. We might have a nuclear exchange right here. That's already a possibility, and it's growing. The more time we wait, the higher that possibility. I think we are at that point and we have to make a decision. And if we wait any longer, we will have a nuclear exchange.
The Strait of Hormuz has been an incredible hand to play from Iran, and there is concern that they've basically proved that Iran can hold the global economy hostage and get away with it because it has been so powerful by closing the strait and bringing people to the negotiating table. I think one thing that is clear is this isn't going to end anytime soon. There was some Pew Research saying 3 in 10 Americans believe the war in Iran could last for over a year. We've got the World Cup coming up, the midterms, so a lot of events to consider as all of this kind of swirls around the region and the world. And that's what we've got time for this episode, unfortunately. Jack, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts today.
That was my pleasure to be here, Marcus. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks to everyone for listening in. Share your thoughts on American society, politics, media, and more. You can join Crossing Party Lines meetup by signing up at crossingpartylines.com. We'll see everyone in a few weeks for another episode of The Conversation, a Crossing Party Lines podcast.